Hi, I'm Ryan Di Corpo. I'm the current co-coordinator of Pax Christi, New York State, and a member of the 50th Anniversary Planning Committee. I'm here today with Kathy Kelly, who is a 1998 recipient of Pax Christi's Teacher of Peace Award. She is a founder of Voices in the Wilderness and former co-coordinator of Voices for Creative Nonviolence. And she has traveled as part of peace teams to Iraq and other countries over 27 times. Kathy, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I was so pleased to see the new list of nominees for the Teacher of Peace Award. What a brilliant list.
Thank you. And we're very happy to have this new series of Teachers of Peace interviews leading up to the conference. I'm wondering if you could tell me, how did you first get involved with the work of Pax Christi USA?
Well, I remember seeing the Pledge of Nonviolence and thinking, well, that makes a lot of good sense. And we had an Illinois Pax Christi group. And there was also a Chicago group that was very, very dedicated to Franz Jägerstätter. But I would say that Pax Christi did something very great for our effort to break the economic sanctions against Iraq. And that was through Bishop Thomas Gumbleton to join in that effort. And it made such a difference. Not only the Pax Christi network, but also many of the Catholic workers began to realize just how horribly children and families were suffering in Iraq because of those economic sanctions. They weren't necessarily going to cause Saddam Hussein to miss a meal, but children were dying from disease and starvation. So, what we did was break those sanctions by packing duffel bags full of medicines and medical relief supplies and taking them over to Iraq, and then doing our best to get them to the hospitals. We would, take pictures and we could verify, yes, these were brought to a hospital. They were delivered to children if they were vitamins, things like that. So Pax Christi, I think, is, as an organization, a teacher of peace. And I've seen that education happen again and again in many contexts with regard to Haiti, with regard to the Ukraine now, the war in Ukraine. But I think that capacity for education is actually, as Pax Christi adopts it, an activism as well. And so I've been very, very appreciative. But in 1998, they made the Teacher of Peace Award, but it was clear to me it was a kind of a protection, in a sense, for the many people that were involved with going over to Iraq to break the economic sanctions, because I think the U.S. government possibly was a bit reluctant to go after us. We were so clear. Every time we got back, we sent word to the State Department and to the Office of the Treasury saying we just disobeyed this law again. We recognize the warnings that you sent us, but we find that we can't be governed by an unjust law that punishes children to death, and we invite you to join us. Well, they didn't join us, but we were, in fact, convicted in a court after the 2003 war had ended. Well, actually, that war I wouldn't say has ended. War isn't over when it's over. But anyway, we were convicted of civilian penalties, but they never tried to collect. There was only $500 in the bank account, but it was still there. It went wherever money goes when you don't touch it.
You had mentioned that Pax Christi helped to provide you and your group some protection when you were doing work in Iraq. Could you describe how that worked, or what challenges you faced from the government or the media and outside influences?
Well, I think that this may sound like a stretch, but through prayer. The prayer card that Pax Christi was distributing was one. There was one that I wrote and one that Art Laffin wrote, and it was praying for peace and to overcome these presumptions of enmity. And again, through education, I had so many opportunities through correspondence and through speaking, through telephone calls, to speak with people. And it wasn't just me. There were, as these 70 delegations that went to Iraq developed, there were people from many, many parts of the country and also from the United Kingdom, and they were supported by Pax Christi UK. We were in touch with Italian friends who were very aware of Pax Christi International. And so I think it's a way that helps people feel a needed sense of solidarity, that kind of helps protect their own ethical or moral compass. And then also, I do think that the United States doesn't necessarily want to tangle with people who seem to have a pretty strong moral footing for what they're doing. Now, that I believe is less so these days. And I also feel that it should be mentioned that there's an Iraqi man, Rafael Dahir, who was accused of breaking the economic sanctions, and he was a medical doctor. They brought in other charges against him. He spent many years in prison. He was just released very recently. And there have been Palestinians who've been accused of assisting people in Palestine and Gaza, and they have been hauled before the courts and penalized. So I suppose to some extent, maybe there is a privilege that is extended to people who are US born that may not be as available to others.
Obviously, the international community is, excuse me, once again concerned with war, especially what's taking place in Ukraine. How do you see the role of Pax Christi today as compared to what it might have been in 1998?
Well, I think that Pope Francis has made a very big difference for all of us. And he has said, let the weapons be silenced so that those who can make a difference will hear the cry of humanity, the cry for peace. And also when Pope Francis addressed the United States Congress when he came here, it's important to remember he posed the question, why would anyone give weapons to people making war? And then he said, the answer is simple. The answer is money. And the money, it is covered in blood. Now that was pretty direct. And so I think we are in line with Catholic teachings and Pope Francis, who has said in one publication from Italy that he doesn't know what to say in terms of whether people in Ukraine should take up arms. He said he's too far away. But he has been very, very clear that there should be a call for a ceasefire and negotiations, and that armament companies should not be allowed to drive the war further. So I think that should be our rallying call too. I think we should be saying that the most important feature of any country's foreign policy regarding Ukraine right now should be working toward a ceasefire. Not that we can determine what Ukraine is going to do, but we can determine whether or not we're going to continue to pour weapons in there. And if you look at trajectories of Lockheed Martin's, Boeing's, and Northrop Grumman's profits from February 24th to this day, there's this spike upward on February 24th when Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, I think they realized, whoa, we are in for a very good market right now. So you've got NATO countries arming themselves, even Germany really turning over commitments against armament. You've got the United States pulling Japan more and more into arming itself. And so I think it's a time for a very assertive, direct condemnation of allowing militarism to become the new dominant religion in the United States. And certainly the Catholic Church ought not to be a smokescreen, that prevents people from seeing what really commands values in the United States, and with the gun owners' lobbies and the gun makers' lobbies and the weapon, the big conventional weapon maker lobbies, and those angling for nuclear weapon buildup and continuance of threats, nuclear threats. It's an incredibly important time to be clear and assertive that it is never right to kill. It is always wrong to kill. You never celebrate killing.
What are your hopes for the future of the Catholic peace movement?
Well, I hope that Jesus' teachings will be foremost and center and matter more than anything else. And Jesus taught that it's our calling to reach out to the other, to the one that's supposedly the inferior or the enemy, to love your enemies. Jesus taught to prize living simply and sharing resources. So I hope that we can be a church that prizes Pope Francis's teaching and leadership, a church that seeks equality, a church that eschews any sense that women aren't equal to men.
Finally, Kathy, do you have any message that you'd like to send to the attendees of the 50th anniversary conference?
Well, certainly a big thank you to everybody who has helped to shape and form and cultivate Pax Christi, to emphasize the vital, crucial moment we're in right now when we face climate catastrophe and nuclear weapon proliferation and time of pandemic. Those are the greatest threats we face. And to some extent, we make ourselves more vulnerable and more endangered if we don't think very carefully on behalf of next generations and on behalf of peacemaking and rooted in the teachings that we're so fortunate to have.
And just as a reminder, the 50th anniversary conference begins August 5th and runs through the 7th in Washington, D.C. Kathy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I really appreciate this time with you.